Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we're starting chapter 7, which is a
Zoya
chapter in King of Scars. If you guys are ever curious about any barking or shuffling noises in the back of my videos, this is who we have to blame. This is Buffy Summers.
Cutie by day, slaying vampires by night.
So we begin chapter 7 about a week after the last time Nikolai's little monster made an appearance. Zoya's up very early before the sun even comes up. It's still dark outside because she has to get to Nikolai's room and make it look like she woke up there. And Tamar and Nadia are already waiting for her with, more bad news because it's
Ravka.
It turns out there's actually been 2 more Kurgud attacks.
Good.
They're soldiers tailored by Grisha fabricators, and they actually have stronger bones, their fists are weighted, they have wings. And let's not forget, the creepiest part about them is that they can actually smell Grisha. Nina was the one who actually told them about this, and it turns out she was right. Zoya's not really happy about that. Their main source of information about these new type of soldiers is thousands of miles away. Even though these new soldiers are pretty
Weird.
and I was kind of thrown off by them whenever they showed up in Crooked Kingdom, I actually feel really bad for the people who are used to create them. They're Grisha volunteers. I mean, in Shuhan, I don't think they're volunteers. There is a little bit of good news though. They actually took 2 of the bodies from Ketterdam whenever the whole attack went down, and they ended up dissecting them and figuring out that it wasn't Grisha steel that was making them so strong. It's actually a new kind of alloy that's actually combined with it and makes it a lot more durable. The good thing about finding this out though is that it's a really rare material, so once they figure out where it comes from, they can track the supplies and, get right to the source. We find out that Zoya's been working really hard to rebuild the Second Army after the Darkling nearly destroyed it. She even wonders how the Darkling could have done something so horrible. Think about it. He built up the strength of the Second Army for generations, practically raised them like children, honed their skills, and what happened when they went against his orders? He slaughtered them. And let's not forget that Zoya was almost one of those people. But she survived. And because she survived, she's going to make sure that the Second Army is even stronger than before. She really wants them to be a force to be reckoned with. She even went deep into all of their enemy territory to see if there were any other Grisha who wanted to join them. By making the Second Army stronger and making Ravka stronger, she wants to be able to change the world they live in for Grisha. She wants there to be a governing body from every nation and for them to actually have set rules and punishments for anyone who harms Grisha. But yet again, for all of this to work, Ravka has to be strong, and that's the problem.
And something a little bit nicer to talk about.
Zoya is explaining how she's very happy to have her regular morning routine back after everything that happened with Nikolai and Yvette. But she can't get over the intimacy of seeing Nikolai every morning.
She walks into his room, sees the nice morning light coming in, rumpled cheeks, his messy hair.
Makes him look very boyish and, just give him that look of a guy that needs to be kissed. So they both want to kiss one another.
I'm screaming.
And then these thoughts of kissing handsome faces go to a place a little bit darker. She remembers that Nikolai wanted to know about her childhood. He wanted her to entertain him, but we find out the story of her childhood isn't very entertaining. I feel like we're getting a glimpse of what made Zoya the person that she is today. We find out that her mother tried to marry her off when she was 9 years old to a much older man. She thinks, should I tell you what happened on my wedding day? What they tried to do to me? The damage I left in my wake. Which I think is a really powerful line. It gave me chills whenever I read it, and I can only imagine what Zoya, even at 9 years old, went through and what power she even had then. That part just really upset me to read. And then it takes a little bit of a lighter turn as she's walking to Nikolai's room. She starts to think, hey, maybe I should just give into this whole mistress thing because then I'd be able to sleep in, which I can relate to. I love sleeping in, want to stay in my bed all day. Especially right now, it looks like Fjorda outside my window and it's freezing, and definitely the kind of day that you want to spend in bed. But I can't help but think that maybe sleeping in isn't the only reason that it'd be nice to give into those rumors. She doesn't even have time to think about this any longer though, because the doors fly open, the twins come in, and you find out that there's a big problem happening with the pilgrims outside the city. And we come to my least favorite character from these books. Find out that there's a new cult that's been brewing outside of the city, and the Apparat isn't too happy about it. The Apparat just got under my skin, and I'm sure that's the point. You know, he's an antagonist in the books, stirred a lot of shit, got on a lot of people's nerves, mine included. I just dislike him so much. I didn't even think about him. Didn't even think he'd be in the book, so wasn't really thrilled to see him show up again.
Causing trouble.
If you forgot about him, you got to block him from your memory and your mind. He's basically the spiritual counselor to the King of Ravka. He was a traitor, a troublemaker, was a really big part of getting Nikolai's dad taken off the throne in the first place. In my notes, I have in parentheses and a dick and a penis drawn next to it. That's how I feel about him if you didn't get that yet. But aside from, you know, the shit with the Apparat,
My annoyance there.
Nikolai actually has his own people in position. He had a feeling that there was going to be trouble with this new cult outside the city. And he still has that really weird relationship with the Apparat. The people of Ravka still just see him as a spiritual advisor, you know, a good guy. They know they can't challenge him because it would really upset the people. And then there's his priest guard. So basically if they challenge him, the priest guard is going to get involved. The people are going to be upset. And I'm on Zoya's side. If she had her way, the Apparat would have been dealt with after the Civil War. Executed would have been best. You know, banishment second best. The priest guard would have been dismantled. And they probably would have all been executed or exiled too. And Nikolai has to remind her to keep calm. And I'm reminding myself during this video to keep calm. Because the Apparat already doesn't really like Grisha. Probably especially Grisha women who have a problem with him. Oh yeah, and let's not forget that he was the one who trapped everybody, including Zoya, underground and held them hostage. And he didn't even support Nikolai during the war. Zoya reminds Nikolai how dangerous he can be. But sadly, his network just reaches too far and there's no good way to deal with him right now. Zoya's thinking about the royal chapel and how it was rebuilt after the war. It was even consecrated by the Apparat himself. That's where Nikolai had his coronation. All of the panels of the 13 saints were refurbished and put back up, and they even added Alina to them. And Zoya really struggled through the coronation. It was where the Darklings slaughtered most of the Second Army, and the Apparat had his part in all of this. Zoya's really in shock once they actually see this group of pilgrims that has grown outside of the city. They're all dressed in black, holding banners with the sun and eclipse. These are people who are worshiping the Darkling. But an interesting fact that we find out is that the leader of this new cult was actually once a member of the Apparat's priest guard. Timar confirms this by saying that they know his name is Yuri and that he actually left the priest guard about a year ago for an unknown reason. And Nikolai and the Apparat are kind of going back and forth about how to handle the situation. The Apparat wants to send his priest guard out, and Nikolai's like,
Nope.
we're not having any more bloodshed in the city. The Apparat tries to, you know, come back at that, and Nikolai's like,
Hey,
I don't ask you anything. I'm the king. Take a step back.
take a seat.
Nikolai ends up deciding that he wants to actually ride out and meet this monk face to face. And he's actually told to be careful because,
You know, this new cult isn't very fond of Nikolai.
and he's like, they just haven't gotten to know me yet, you know? The good thing is, though, that there isn't just this, you know, new cult hanging out outside the city walls. There's actually other people there on business, you know, merchants for trade, or people just visiting the lower part of town. And all of these people know Nikolai as their king, their war hero. This is the guy who gave them years of peace after, you know, that awful civil war, after years of having to live with the fold. And he's the one that is working toward this great peace and making Ravka better. And these people are falling to their knees. They're calling him the King of Scars.
And they're shouting, Son of Ravka.
When Nikolai gets out to his people, he's instantly in king mode.
He's waving at the people.
But then there's also the pilgrims who aren't very happy with Nikolai, at the same time shouting,
Pretender, murderer.
and Nikolai's like, must have been really busy. So when Zoya gets closer to Yuri, she notices that he's actually pretty young, that he's pale, has a long face, and right away he's like,
Hey,
you tell that false priest of yours that we want the Darkling to become a saint. The starless one. And right away, Nikolai's in peak Nikolai mode. He's trying to be funny and witty with this guy, tells him that he will consider making the Darkling a saint if he actually just comes and talks to him and joins him for breakfast. The monk's getting riled up and he's like,
I will not be wooed by you.
and Nikolai's like, okay, but will you be having coffee or tea at this breakfast? And the crowd's laughing and Yuri's very unsure of what to do. Then the monk says that the age of saints has arrived and that's why there are all of these signs popping up all over Ravka. So at this point, you know, this is going on long enough. So Nikolai joins Yuri up on the rock, lets him know, very casually that there are snipers in perfect position ready to take not only Yuri out, but to skim Nikolai's shoulders so that it looks like someone was trying to assassinate Nikolai. Nikolai lets Yuri know that this isn't going to look good for him, that it's way too outlandish for the king of Ravka to get himself shot just to prove a point.
He would even fall dramatically to the ground as he was shot.
So after this, Yuri agrees to go with Nikolai, which, why wouldn't he? But he lets Nikolai know that if he isn't returned, that his followers would be really upset and there would be blood in the streets. But Nikolai didn't come to this fight empty-handed. He lets Yuri know that he knows his mother's name and they know exactly where she lives. And of course, once they get back in the city walls, the apparat's trying to stir more trouble. He wants his priest guard to take Yuri into custody for questioning, but Nikolai stops that. He even lets the apparat know that the monk is his guest. And then he asks him why Yuri left the priest guard in the first place. The apparat says he doesn't know, that Yuri was actually one of his most gifted scholars. His ideas were pretty out there, but they were still brilliant. Then about a year ago, he just kind of left unexpectedly and then randomly just reappeared preaching this new gospel about the Darkling. So Nikolai and the apparat are still in this back and forth, and eventually Nikolai's like, hey, you just need some gold to shut up, pretty much, and to not care that we're talking to Yuri. And the apparat lets him know that saints don't really need gold.
But churches do.
So to, appease the apparat for this very difficult day, Nikolai agrees to build more churches for him. This really upsets Zoya. She thinks that Nikolai gave in too easily to the apparat, like he usually does, like everybody usually does. The old king, the Darkling, Alina, they all appease the apparat. But so far, that's gotten everyone in trouble. Zoya knows that anyone who has dealt with the apparat has paid in blood. So the rest of Zoya's day isn't quite as exciting. She spends the rest of her time helping train Grisha squalors, and they're actually going to be sent to the southern border to make sure if another Shu attack happens, they'll be better prepared. And she's dining with Jenny and David in the Golden Dome when she sees Koei talking to a group of people at another table. And she's thinking he's less of a scientist than a soldier, but he really did his best to help David and all the other fabricators come up with a cure for Parem, even if he's pretty full of himself because he named himself Phoenix Rising. After dinner, Zoya just wants to head back to her chambers to relax before she has to chain Nikolai up for the night. She's thinking how they used to be the Darkling's room and how everyone pretty much refused to stay in them but her. She was really glad to take over anything that was the Darkling. She was the first one who had a sledgehammer there ready to knock walls down and knock down anything that remained from him. Just for that one time though, she wasn't there to get her hands dirty. And the room seems to be really beautiful. The ceiling now has a cloudy sky and the walls look like a storm-swept sea.
Nikolai has a little homage to the sea in his room as well.
And she says that there's a boat that has a flag with 2 tiny stars on it, that if anyone even noticed it in the first place, they wouldn't have any idea what it meant. But I would like to know what it means. Zoe thinks about how she hasn't been able to even sleep peacefully ever since the Darkling's attack. Before the civil war with the Darkling, she felt really at peace. She felt really safe and secure at the little palace, and she would sleep like a baby. But now even the slightest noise wakes her because that sense of security is gone. And then out of nowhere, she hears this knock on the door, and it's Tamar, and she lets her know that Nikolai is out.
And of course, I'm completely panicking.
And as I'm reading this and I'm panicking, Tamar looks at Zoya,
notices her lovely nightgown that just hugs her body perfectly,
and asks her who she's wearing that for. And Zoya, of course, says she's wearing it for herself. I was like, okay, I kind of believe that. Like maybe 97% of it is, for Zoya to enjoy herself and to feel good in. Like most of us, like to feel good in certain things we wear. Maybe 1% is for those times that someone would accidentally see her, like now. And then the other 2% are definitely for when Nikolai sees her. I mean, I don't doubt that. So once she finds out Nikolai's out, she starts hurrying her way down the secret tunnel that she had built when her room was being made over. She had it dug so that it connected to the other passages at the Grand Palace. And then we find out that the chains weren't broken. they were unlocked. And in my head, I'm like, it's the shy one. It's that shy guard that I told you guys not to trust. And Toilet said that he heard glass breaking and, you know, probably just like the first time he saw him come out, he probably just turned around and was like, Julia was the one guarding the door, so he didn't see anybody going in or out, which made me think there has to be a secret passage in the king's room. Somebody has to know how to get in or out of there. It's either a secret spy who's working in the palace. It might be the apparat. I don't know who. The apparat would be one to know about it because, you know, he's worked with kings in the past. He might have needed a, you know, quick in and out into their rooms for whatever
nefarious business they had going on.
Or, you know, if my suspicions are correct and it's the shy guy, then, you know, if he's Nikolai's most trusted guard, he would know a way in and out of his room too. And this is all pretty crazy. So Zoya's even thinking maybe this monster finally just learned how to pick a lock.
Suspicious!
This is all very suspicious to me. So when Zoya and the twins are all together, they start riding really hard to try to find where Nikolai's going. And she's reaching out with her currents, trying to feel where he is. She says it's not just like, you know, the weight changes in the air and things like that that help her find him. It's actually the wrongness in the magic that was used to create him that she can feel.
Which is pretty creepy.
They actually find Nikolai in this place that was favored among Grisha. It was like a good place for snow riding and hanging out when times were a lot better. So maybe this was even a place that Nikolai kind of knew of in his subconscious, and that's why he was headed there. Luckily, everybody in the town is still sleeping. Zoya notices a couple lights on here and there, but she's not really worried about it. But dawn is coming. Nikolai's headed toward the town hall, so the twins head over there. Then once the twins are already on their way, Zoya notices fly off to a church tower. So her backup is running in one direction and Nikolai is going in the other. Morning is coming, she has to get to him fast. She doesn't have a choice. She has to go after him by herself. Because Zoya doesn't have time to spare, she actually uses a gust of wind to hurl herself into the bell tower. Obviously, this isn't something Zoya does regularly, so she throws herself too hard and too fast and ends up hurting herself when she lands. As she's laying there, she can make out Nikolai's shape hanging out in the bell tower. This is giving me like the end of Fantasia vibes, like that creature sitting on top of the tower. In this moment of all moments, Zoya notices his bare chest, his pants that are slung across his hips. The thirst is real. She's still checking him out when he's in beast form. You know, Zoya made a joke in one of the last chapters about how Nikolai marrying a girl and saying,
"Oh, I'm this wealthy king. Come to my kingdom and be my bride," but I turn into a beast at night.
It's a fairy tale dream that any girl would buy into, so maybe Zoya's just buying into it. When Zoya's done checking Nikolai out, he lets out this really low, deep growl that Zoya can feel in her body. It's in this moment that she notices that tonight is different, that Nikolai is different, that she is prey in this moment because Nikolai is hungry. Zoya's thirsty, Nikolai's hungry.
Here we are.
Zoya tries scolding Nikolai and the beast actually laughs at her. After this, Zoya and Nikolai end up fighting and he notices that her shoulders hurt and he sees this weakness in his prey. And Zoya's scared in this moment and she even calls out for the twins for help, hoping that they can hear her, hoping that they're close enough to get to her in time before she's made a meal. While this is going on, she's taking in more details about Nikolai in his form. His clawed feet actually move silently across the floor. They're eerily inhuman. The elegant lines of his face are similar, but his eyes are black as ink. The shadows in his wings pulse. Not to mention the needle-like fangs that are sharp and gleam like obsidian. Zoya's still really freaked out. She has no idea what to do since she's hurt. She can't use both of her hands to, use the full force of her powers. So she tries calling him, Captain, even tries calling him Puppy to see if that rings a bell. She does try to use her power and blow him away, but his claws just dig into the floor and he hangs on. And once he gets up to her, he just bats her good arm aside. And then he says her name. As I'm reading this, I'm just screaming at my book.
Like, oh my god!
Speaking of noisy beasts, Zoya's completely shocked. This creature does not speak. This creature does not know Zoya's name. But the worst part about this was the voice. It was not Nikolai's voice, and it was very familiar.
So I'm just like, It's the Darkling.
And 1,000 thoughts are running through Zoya's head at this point. And luckily at that point, the door of the bell tower just flies open and the twins rush in to help her. Timar throws her axes. One hits him in the shoulder. Another one catches his wing on the ground. And then Toila's using his powers to slow Nikolai's heart rate and make him pass out. And once he's out, the creature turns back into Nikolai. And the sound of this voice is making Zoya think this isn't just a mindless beast we're dealing with here. It's much more serious than that. This voice went beyond the primal need of hunger, and this voice seemed vengeful. And this means they can't control him anymore, which is a big problem.
Stressed.
And on top of not being able to control him, they just have a ton of their enemies coming to the palace for a big party. No big deal. Julia's like, hey, we just invited all of these emissaries to come and watch this horror. At this time, Zoya's dream of this bigger, better Ravka is just totally going out the window, flying out of the bell tower. But all of this kind of snapped Zoya into that general mode.
General mode.
She's thinking about all the horrors that Nina told her happened at the ice court to Grisha. She's thinking about the shoes stealing Grisha and turning them into monsters. And last, she thinks about the bodies that littered the little palace. Zoya isn't going to let this happen again. The chapter ends with her saying, they find a cure or Ravka falls. When I think about the stuff that happened at the little palace, it still makes me really sad. You know what? Zoya doesn't come out and say, oh,
it was the Darkling's voice, but
I'm going to assume it is. Which just leads me to believe that the Darkling's power, a piece of the Darkling, is really still inside of Nikolai. Now they have this Yuri guy to deal with on top of the Apparat.
I'm still very worried about him.
Nikolai isn't as easy to manipulate as his dad was. I'm sure the Apparat realizes that now. And I'm left wondering how Nikolai almost killing Zoya is going to affect their relationship. I'm sure it's, not the greatest thing in a budding romance to almost eat the girl you're falling for. But Zoya at least, was still checking him out in beast form, so there might be some hope. And I cannot wait to talk to you guys about the next chapter. I cannot wait to figure out what's going to happen next.
So please go ahead and hit that like button, hit subscribe,
so we can talk more about this book. I love it. See you next time.